What's going on, guys? This is the Factory Tour. I'm your host, Paul Patterson. I'm joined today by my friend Chris Miles, filling in for the second time for a guest who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. I was supposed to sit down with Wyatt over at JWB. He had some stuff come up. He wasn't able to jump on the show, but go check out his stuff anyway if you can, and I'm sure we'll have him on at some point. In the meantime, Chris is not a bad consolation prize at all. I was hoping to bring him on soon anyway. So he is here. He answered the bell. Chris, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Paul. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great, man. I'm just trying to keep up, though. There are so many things happening right now in the preseason. Preseason week 2 just wrapped up. How much of all this news and noise will actually matter in the grand scheme of things, I truly have no idea. But it is a real information overload, just trying to break down like all of these snap counts, who's playing with the starters, who's not, who's getting cut, who's actually a backup running back. So we're going to try to break down a lot of the relevant storylines and just sort of parse through what matters, because it is really hard to stay on top of all this stuff. The first thing, though, is a big piece of news about a very relevant player, which is Jonathan Taylor, who we already knew is kind of expressing his desire to be traded from the Indianapolis Colts, but it was recently stated that the Colts have granted him permission to seek a trade. So that's a little bit more, legitimacy, a little bit of momentum here. It seems like he really does want to move on to a new landing spot. I don't really know the likelihood of this happening, so I'm just going to kick it over to you. Ultimately, do you think Jonathan Taylor is going to be traded?
I don't think so. We've seen the Colts say that, they don't really value the running back position, but then they're coming around and asking for a first-round pick for him. So a potential team's going to need to put out a first-round pick and then sign him to probably an expensive extension after that. Mm-hmm. I don't think many teams are really going to want to offer that combination. I did see a tweet today from an NFL insider that was, polling the opinions of different GMs, and he received a lot of people coming back with, I think Taylor's worth like a second, maybe a second and a third, so a random day 2 pick, something like that. So if the Colts bring down their expectations to a more reasonable level, I mean, honestly, getting a second and a third out of him isn't a terrible deal, and you don't have to, pay the extension and everything. But I just don't think it's very likely he gets traded. I think the Colts want to win, and I think that they know that he makes their team much better.
Yeah, I tend to agree that they are asking for way too much. I mean, a first-round pick, they drafted him in the second round. They burned up 3 of his rookie years, which are like the most valuable years on his contract. So the idea that they can now flip him for a profit is a little bit ludicrous to me. So ultimately, I think the Colts are the most realistic landing spot for Jonathan Taylor, but maybe they'll capitulate. They'll realize that they don't really have they can't really get that asking price from anybody, and maybe they'll lower their asking price. So I guess we could speculate a little bit on if he's traded, where might he be traded and where would we like him to be traded. So I thought it would be fun to kind of imagine the ideal landing spot for him. And I thought about it for a bit. I almost went with the Chiefs. And then I changed my mind and I thought, it would be even better, would be a team that actually likes to throw to the running back. And that's the Bengals. So, if you stick with me for a second here, like maybe this Joe Mixon stuff does go south. Maybe he does get arrested or suspended or something, or maybe he's just washed and they know it. They go out and they get Jonathan Taylor. He becomes this every down back for them. They have nobody behind Joe Mixon. I mean, Travion Williams is their biggest hope for a backup who's like a 5th-year running back who's never done anything and is currently hurt. Chase Brown, their 6th-round pick, hasn't accomplished anything. Chris Evans has been hanging around the team for years, never really proven himself to be even an average talent. So, I mean, this place is desperate for a quality running back. This is a team with Super Bowl aspirations, playmakers on the wide receiver core. I think that would be an amazing spot for him.
Yeah, I think that's a really good. I didn't think about that one. I wrote a couple teams down here. I mean, obviously Kansas City. That's though we need to do something a little more, intuitive. I wrote down the Rams actually as a spot, kind of knock Cam Akers back, and that team really only has Cooper Kupp, and that's it. So if you could give Matthew Stafford and their running game something else to lean on, and an elite running back with Jonathan Taylor, I mean, we could see Gurley type numbers RB1 season pretty easily if he ended up there.
Yeah, for sure. My hesitancy with a team like the Rams is just like, they don't really throw to the running back much, but they did do it more so when they had an all-around talent like Todd Gurley. So that could come back. Unfortunately, they're probably not in the market for a running back right now, given the team is a total disaster, but who
And they
knows?
have no picks to spend anyway.
We did say ideal landing spots, not realistic. In terms of spots that he could end up, I did actually see a tweet today from, I have no idea if it was a reputable source, saying that the Eagles were aggressively pursuing Jonathan Taylor. I mean, who knows? That doesn't really seem in character for the Eagles. They are more so a team that likes to try to piece the position together. You saw them trade a day 3 pick for Swift. That seemed like a sharp move, bring in Rashad Penny for very little money. It seems like it would be out of character, but maybe he can finesse some kind of good deal where we can maybe trade an expendable asset and a late pick or something and get him. I say we as an Eagles fan, obviously. That would be incredible, I think, for the Eagles offense. I think it would be very good for Jonathan Taylor. Maybe not the best landing spot because I've already stated my concerns about the pass catching upside. But unlike with somebody like Swift, he would get all the carries and he would probably average like 5.5 per carry. He score
probably
15
more
touchdowns. Like, it would be an incredible fit between the offensive line, Jalen Hurts, threat to run, and Jonathan Taylor. That would be exciting. Is there another spot you think is realistic?
There's one other spot I'd written down. I think the Vikings would be a potential landing spot. Just kind of knock Madison right back to where he was, and Jonathan Taylor get 75% opportunity share there. It's just an offense that likes to throw to the running back, likes to use the running back, high scoring offense. I think that'd be realistic and a great spot.
Yeah, they've got a need. I mean, even if they like Madison, I mean, they don't have anybody established behind him. Not to say that any team really needs a running back, especially one that's going to command a top of the market contract. But in terms of teams that could use a running back, they are trying to compete now and they have a weakness at the position. So I think that is a realistic one. I'd written them down before I saw the Eagles tweet, and that was just too fun to pass up. So I had to take that one. But yeah, I ultimately just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the Colts are going to give up on their high-end asking price, and I just don't think any team is really going to pay up. You can see in this current market, like, nobody wants to pay the running backs. There are so many teams that already have quality running backs that really don't need to spend up on Taylor, even if he would add a little something to their offense. So we'll see what happens. I don't think he's going to hold out. I don't think he's going to get traded. I think he will just begrudgingly play for the Colts eventually, but we shall see. We will keep an eye on it. He has been falling a bit in those like underdog drafts. Maybe there's a buy window in Dynasty as well. I do think he will play somewhere, and most places will be either a lateral move or even an upgrade from Indianapolis. So if you can capitalize on people that are just nervous about uncertainty, this would be a good time to send out some offers.
Yeah,
do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's the sharp move. Anytime there's panic, you want to buy the panic. We saw all these holdout guys, Saquon, Jacobs, JT, Dobbins. The news comes out, people get scared, they drop in value, then they remain with the teams. It's a smart thing to do, and their value goes back up. So yeah, Jonathan Taylor's just in the dip cycle right now.
And ultimately, these situations, they always resolve themselves in one way or another. He has a limited window to make money in the NFL, and he knows that, and he's gonna capitalize on it. Let's move on here to another little segment here. There are big expectations for this rookie tight end class. I've already talked about it a little bit in past shows. I touched on it with Ben a couple weeks back. So I just wanted to circle back around because we do have some more information about how these rookie tight ends are fitting in new offenses, and just sort of see where we're at with expectations for the 2023 rookie tight ends, specifically the big four. So Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Sam Laporta, and Luke Musgrave. Luke Musgrave's really wiggled his way in there. I mean, he was a round 2 pick in the NFL draft, but he wasn't in that conversation until recently. Just seems like he's been dominating the Packers camp and getting a ton of snaps with the first team, like basically all the snaps with the first team. So it's interesting. I've typically been kind of anti-rookie tight end because the historical sample is pretty negative, but it's hard to argue with the roles that these guys seem to have already. So what's your take on these rookie tight ends? Are we chasing fool's gold here?
Yeah, I think probably, but they do give me a lot of hope. Like Sam Laporta, he's in a pass-heavy offense, and it looks like he's going to be featured in the receiving game immediately. Luke Musgrave, you're just mentioning, he's been killing camp. He's been doing well in the preseason. He honestly could have the second most targets on the team for the Packers this year. Wouldn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. Kincaid, he's another guy. He's a high upside guy, but we can't forget about Dawson Knox. He still exists. He's a proven player for the team, and teams like that kind of stuff. Michael Mayer is probably the one I'm the most worried about. He hasn't been in the news a lot, I haven't seen a lot of camp clips of him, but I think in general, we probably are expecting too much. But I don't know, this group does give me a lot of hope. It wouldn't shock me if we saw two of these guys eclipse 600 receiving yards. And we know that in itself would be a huge abnormality from a tight end class.
Yeah, that's true. There aren't a lot of rookie tight ends that reach that mark. I guess the question would be like, what are we expecting, right? In best ball, it's like you're just looking for a couple of spike weeks. Maybe those happen, in the playoffs. In Dynasty, obviously, you're looking more long term. Like, can these guys accrue value? I definitely think all of these guys are set up well to accrue value from year 1 to year 2 because they're all going to get on the field. I think all of them are talented. If you get those positive signals like we saw from somebody like Chigakonkwo, who didn't have a big stat line, he just was efficient and he went into year 2 looking to have a larger role. All these guys sort of profile to have that. So I think they are good dynasty buys. They were better buys a few months ago because they're all gaining value, especially Musgrave. But I do think that we should be very excited about this tight end class for dynasty. I did hear a good point from Sam Sherman, who does ADP chasing. It's a podcast for the ship chasing YouTube channel. And he made a good point about these rookie tight ends. This was more of a seasonal take, but I do think it matters, which is that one of the biggest obstacles for rookie tight ends is just their limited route participation. So in other words, like we say rookie tight ends are bad. When we look back, one of the main reasons for that is just that they don't get to run as many routes. And that's usually because of other veteran tight ends on the team being more trusted, especially with like blocking assignments. So you've already kind of won half the battle if a rookie tight end is looking to get all the snaps or a full-time role, so to speak. And with at least Luke Musgrave and Sam Laporta, we already really have that. Sam Laporta rested with the Lions starters this past week. All of the other tight ends on the team played. He seems very locked into that starting role. And then, like I said, Musgrave plays all the snaps with the starters. Josiah DeGuara has been out, and he might be their backup tight end. He might get a little bit of that blocking work, but both of these guys seem set up to have huge snap shares right away, run a lot of routes, and that does make me a little bit excited about what they could contribute in year 1. Dalton Kincaid, on the other hand, like you said, he's still contending with Dawson Knox, who's dealing with a little bit of an injury right now. He did play basically all the snaps this past week in preseason with Knox out. He did catch some passes. So, for his part, he seems to be doing well, everything he can control. It's just what snaps is he going to get with Knox on the field? And then, like you said, with Mayer, I haven't heard a lot about Mayer, honestly. I probably should have looked into it a little bit more. But like you said, not hearing about him is a little bit of a concern. I know Austin Hooper is out there. Maybe he can keep him off the field a little bit like he did with Chigakonkwo, but we'll see. Do you have anything to add to all that? Is there a guy here that you think is going to distance himself from the rest? If you had to bet on one of these guys to have a significant rookie season, which one would that be?
If I had to pick one to have a significant season, it'd probably be Sam Laporta. But I also would like to point out that 3 of these guys are already top 12 dynasty tight ends. Kincaid, tight end 7, Mayer, tight end 10, and Laporta, tight end 12. So It's not like we're going to see, 3 of these guys be top 8 tight ends or something like that. That would be wild. Really, we're just trying to bet on which one of the 3 can become a top 6 tight end. We want to see him hit that threshold. And Dalton Kincaid being the closest is probably the most likely, but I'm putting my money on Sam Laporta as he's tight end 12. So he has the most to gain. And I also think he's going to have the most immediate opportunity on his team. And he's going to be able to take advantage of that and hopefully accrue some value and get in that top 6.
Yeah. I mean, I think Sam Laporta is a great bet for that. I do prefer him to Mayer comfortably right now. Just all the buzz makes it hard to ignore. But to be fair, the positional ADP is not the only thing to consider. There is a pretty wide gap between George Kittle at tight end 5 in the 6th round versus Sam Laporta at tight end 12 in the 10th round. We could see Mayer and Laporta and Musgrave gain multiple rounds of ADP, even if their positional ranking doesn't move up that much. And that's still going to be significant, relative to the wide receivers and running backs in that range. I do think we could see, I don't think we'll see a ton of movement at tight end because it is a pretty stable position overall, but I definitely think Darren Waller will fall out of the top 10. He's ninth right now, so he's ahead of Mayer and Laporta, and Njoku's ahead of Laporta. Those guys are going to make way. And then who knows, either Goddard or Kittle, if we see a down year from one of those guys. Kittle's already 30. Goddard's going to be 30 by next year. Maybe they could drop down a little bit if we see one of these young tight ends projecting to score similarly to them. They could jump ahead. So I think that's your path to top 6. Yeah, and if I was going to guess right now, I think their dynasty values would probably fall Kincaid, Laporta, Musgrave, and Mayer. I just tend to think Kincaid is going to do enough on this Bills team to keep people excited for next year, and everybody's going to tell themselves that he will become a full-time player in 2024, which could be the case. Do you feel like they would be ranked like that, or do you think they would shake out a different way?
I think that sounds pretty accurate. I think Mayer might stay above Musgrave just because he's already a couple spots above Musgrave, and people tight end 10 to tight end 18. So people just tend to not make such huge swings as long as the player is somewhat decent or shows flashes. So I just think it'd be really Musgrave would have to have a really nice season, and Mayer would have to have a really bad season where he's not showing anything for those two to kind of flip flop. But I think, Kincaid 1 is pretty set in stone, and I think Laporta 2 is pretty set in stone.
So interestingly, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really like Sam Laporta. I think I don't know why he's ranked under Michael Mayer still. I think he should be above him right now.
For Mayer, it's the pedigree. And honestly, I'm starting to see a similarity here with Mayer and Musgrave that reminds me a lot of Trey McBride and Chigakonkwo from last year, right? Like Trey McBride got the earlier draft capital. He had more of the traditional tight end prospect profile, and then he has a disappointing year in a dysfunctional offense. Meanwhile, Chigakonkwo makes big plays, shows up in highlight reels, gets a bigger role than people expect, and then he jumps McBride comfortably. I think we could see something like that. It just depends how bad the Raiders offense is, and it depends on how much Musgrave is able to do. Mayer is able to do. I mean, Austin Hooper is not going to be as much of a hindrance to him as Zach Ertz. So it's really going to be up to Mayer and what he can do. But I could see it playing out similarly, which is why I listed Musgrave ahead. But I think they'll all be on the rise a year from now.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
All right. We're going to move on now to some other preseason storylines. We're going to start with some injuries. Before that, though, I want to ask you the same question I asked my guest, Matt Ward, last week, which is, how do you handle the information overload of the NFL preseason? Like, is there any general rules that you try to follow to prevent yourself from being swept up in the sensationalism of preseason football?
So I really liked what Matt said last week, where you're probably better off ignoring all of it than paying attention to all of it. Mm-hmm. But we still need to sift through and figure out what's relevant so we know what to listen to. General rule for me, anything negative needs to be paid attention to. Usually people are just out there trying to hype people up. Everybody, every media player, they're all trying to hype up the new rookie picks and everything. They're all going to have good news. If they're out there posting negative things about the rookies, that's when you need to be afraid. And then the other thing I do, I pretty much just don't listen to coach speak. And I don't pay attention to headlines. Like if people are posting about a headline, read the article. It almost always has something different than the headline. But those are just really things I look for in general. And lastly, to help sift through it, I think really the best way to do it is find someone you respect and that is going to parse through the information on their own and then listen to what they have to say. Because that's a person that you trust is going to actually give you the relevant information and not just overload you with everything that's happening, whether it matters or not. So that's kind of how I get through the preseason.
So in other words, keep listening to this podcast so that we can parse through the relevant information, assuming that you respect us and our opinions, which you certainly don't have to do. But you could, and we will do our best to deliver on that. I think those are some good points too, just about the human psychology of it all. The negative news does need to outweigh the positive because these players, beat reporters, coaches are all incentivized to say good things, right? That's what's going to get people excited. And so when you do hear bad things, for sure, you want to pay attention to that and be aware. Be quick to adjust your priors as needed. Like I said, we do have some injuries here, unfortunately, in the preseason. These are some guys I was really excited about, some guys not so much. We'll start with Jameson Williams, who suffered, I forgot to write it down, some kind of leg injury. I think it was a hamstring.
I think it was a hamstring too.
either way, he's not playing the rest of the preseason. Those
He's
were
not
going to
going to
be
play the
his.
first 6 weeks of the year.
Yeah, that was already determined. He wasn't going to play the first 6 weeks of the year. That was due to his gambling suspension. But now he's not going to get any of those reps in the preseason. I mean, that's just going to hurt the guy who just barely has played since he's been drafted. He's going to come back week 7 now after not really getting any preseason, rehabbing this injury for who knows how long. It's just not good vibes for Jameson Williams. He continues to plummet in seasonal drafts. He continues to plummet in Dynasty. I mean, what do you do with this guy? Like, he's radioactive at this point.
I mean, are we looking at the wide receiver version of Trey Lance, where he's just getting the absolute 1% outcome, drafted highly, good prospect, and just can't seem to get on the field?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like it right now. I think that could be a good comp, which is not good because that means by this time next year, somebody like, I don't know, who's a mediocre wide receiver. Darnell Mooney is going to be traded to the Detroit Lions and going to be running routes ahead of him. And then as soon as the season's about to start, they also announce that Van Jefferson is ahead of him on the depth chart. That's what it's going to be. That's not a good trajectory to be on. I mean, I certainly couldn't advise anybody to buy him right now. Like I don't care what his prospect profile looked like. I was kind of medium on his prospect profile. I thought he was a fine bet in the late first round of rookie drafts, but at this point, I just don't know. It's like so unprecedented, all of these things that have gone wrong. And I really just can't imagine trying to invest in this situation at this point. I would just stay away.
Yeah, I definitely would not recommend to buy. I'd probably be looking to sell. I see a recent trade here, Jameson Williams and Luke Musgrave for a first and 2/3. I would take the first all day long. If you can get about a first for Jameson Williams, I mean, I'm smashing the trigger on that. I might even take, 2 seconds at this point. I think it might just be better to sell him now before he does become Trey Lance. And
yeah, Chris, I think that's a good point. And I do think there's a little potential for a value gain right around the time he's set to return to the field in week 7. I certainly wouldn't be buying him with the expectation of reselling him immediately once he's back, because we just don't know how the market's going to react. But if you do have him and you're kind of putting him out there and nobody's willing to send you an offer, maybe just wait until week 5, week 6. Things aren't going to really get worse for him. And there's potential somebody's going to be excited to try to pick him up, have a little bit of fear of missing out once he's set to return to the field. So that's probably how I would play it. Otherwise, just something like I said, I'm staying away from. And if anything, it's just more positive news for Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. Like, any competition from Jameson Williams that is taken out of the equation is going to mean more targets for them.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy too where you can go to, a team that is rebuilding and maybe they have some veterans left on their squad. You could go to Jameson Williams and try to maybe get a Keenan Allen or an Amari Cooper or something like that. Just get a guy that's going to score you some points this year. And if it's similar value, but you can get rid of him and get a guy you know is going to play and we already know is good, I think that might be worth a swap too.
Absolutely agree with you there. The next injury hits a little closer to home, a little harder for me. And that's Devon. Oh my gosh, I never say his name right. Devon Achane. He has that apostrophe in his name now, so I think that's how it's pronounced. He suffered some kind of shoulder injury. It looks like it's not super serious, probably just a couple weeks, but it's not good for a rookie, ramping up in the preseason to get this kind of setback. I think it will definitely slow him down to open the season. It's going to mean that Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson have more of a firm hold on that backfield as the season opens up. But the team was definitely excited about him. They had drawn up some creative play calls for him. I just don't know how quickly he's going to be able to push his way into a significant role. I do think he's talented. So I think by season's end, he will, if not be the starter, at least be a regular contributor to the offense. But it's probably going to be a slow start for him. What do you think about Achane at this point?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on how, Mostert and Wilson are running. If they're out there cooking and playing well, I don't think, McDaniel's going to be too excited to pull them off and try out Achane and, the real games. But I do agree. I would expect, obviously, fantasy playoffs, maybe week 10, week 11. By then, Devon Achane should, be fully ramped and at least have, at minimum 45 to 55% opportunity share.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to the player talent, and like I'm a believer in his talent, as are you.
Hmm.
He hasn't done anything except just pop off for the entire Dolphins camp. I mean, like we said, you can fade positive news a little bit, but it has been a steady drumbeat of Devon Chain did this, he did that every single day. And when there is a pattern like that, you want to pay attention. It seems like he's a guy who's making plays. We have every reason to believe, based on his profile, that he can play. Size is really his only concern, and I don't think McDaniels really cares about that. So I'm still in on him. I'm willing to go ahead and buy on him. And if early in the season he's not doing anything, that's probably when your buy window is going to open for especially if he's on a contending team. You can go ahead and try to pick him up on the cheap. I would absolutely be keeping him on your radar. Make a note now. Like, this is something I try to do, is I try to write down guys so I don't forget. And I might even write down like a target window to buy or to sell, because there's a lot of information flying around. The market is changing constantly, and it can be really hard to keep track, especially if you're in a lot of leagues, of like when is the right time to deal a player. So, if you have like a little notebook you could use, or you could keep a note on your phone, just like write down a little note for yourself, some buy sell information. Sell Jamison Williams week 5, buy Devon Chain week 5. Like, I think that would really help you out.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Paul. I think people should definitely be doing something like that if they want to be more serious in their leagues.
Another guy you could potentially pick up at a slight discount is Jackson Smith-Njigba, because he did just break or fracture, I don't know the difference, a bone in his wrist, and he's expected to miss some time. He's getting that surgically repaired. It's unclear whether or not he will play week 1. I've seen some more pessimistic reporting, some more optimistic reporting. Either way, he's not going to be 100% week 1, so he's going to be eased in. And, this is another situation where a rookie could disappoint to open the season. Maybe there's a little buy window there. I think generally managers are getting a little smarter about this. But like, I had a trade a couple years ago where I bought Justin Jefferson for peanuts 2 weeks into his career because he wasn't doing anything. And then he obviously went nuclear after that. But you never know. Some managers are just very reactive, especially when there's 2 talented receivers ahead of him on the depth chart. Like, somebody might be like, "Oh, this guy's buried. He's never going to contribute." And then you can go out and sweep him, because he was actually doing incredibly well in preseason. He was getting a lot of targets when he was out there. He's probably not going to play in 12 personnel right away, but by the time the fantasy playoffs roll around, I will not be surprised if he has kind of forced his way into a full-time role.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with what you're saying too. It's really hard to buy dips on players like this where we have, a top 6 rookie pick, and he's going to play week 1 most likely. It might not be 100%, but he'll be on the field. It's tough to buy a dip, but if you can just get a slight discount, I mean, go for it for sure. He's a guy I'm still 100% believing in. I want him on all my teams. He's going to be very good.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even need a dip necessarily. Like, I think he's reasonably priced in Dynasty. You just need a manager to even open the door for you, right? Like,
Yeah.
that might be all you get. You might not get a discount, but you might get a manager who's like, yeah, I could sell him. He's not scoring points for me right now. He's not really getting in my lineup. I'll listen to offers. That's really all you need, because with these highly drafted rookies, usually the managers aren't even really interested in listening to offers. It's like, I just drafted this guy. Like, I haven't even played him yet. Leave me alone. So that could be all you get. But at his price right now, he's in the early 4th round of startups, outside the top 12 wide receivers. I think this guy's going to be a star. I would pay that price. The only thing that's prevented me from buying more JSN is that he's more expensive than Drake London. So I just want to buy Drake London, but I'll buy both of them. Just get them both.
That is a great point, Paul. It just makes people more likely to move him, makes him a little more liquid. It doesn't necessarily lower his price. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. The last injury here, I'm sure there's more, but the last significant injury here that we have to talk about is Terry McLaurin, who suffered a toe injury. I believe they said it was turf toe. My notes here are not as comprehensive as I would like, but it was a toe injury suffered in their preseason game this week. And similar to JSN, the timetable is a little bit up in the air. There is some optimism for week 1. Could be limited to start this season. The way I see it, this is bad news for McLaurin, obviously, who I think was already a little bit overvalued in Dynasty to begin with. And I think it's good news for Jahan Dotson, who I've been kind of warming up to. I talked about him on this show. I just talked about him on the Dynasty Zoltan podcast that dropped today. Today is Wednesday, by the way. I don't know when you're watching this, but we did a whole Commanders team preview, and I was kind of talking about how I like Dotson. I think his profile, or his rookie year profile, was a little bit under the radar, and he was better than people think. And then he graded out really well in perception. So like I kind of think following this injury, he's kind of set up to just sort of run away with the wide receiver one job. Am I getting carried away here? How do you respond to this type of injury?
I don't think you're getting carried away. I think when McLaurin returns, he'll be the firm wide receiver one. But I do think this does open a door for Dotson just to be, prove that he can handle it on his own if McLaurin does miss time. Because like you were saying, I do think Dotson's a good talent. I've been working with Dotson as well. I've been trying to buy him. I think he's a good player, and I think he offers a similar skill set to what Terry McLaurin has already. So I could definitely see him stepping into that role just perfectly, naturally, and doing really well. And if that happens, then it'll be more of a, Sam Howell, getting to choose 50-50 maybe between the two instead of, 60-40 between the two.
Yeah, I think I brought this exact sample up when we did the wide receiver landscape show a month or two ago. So I'm not going to go through all the stats again, but over the last 5 weeks of last season, they were basically identical. They had the same exact target share, the same targets per out run. McLaurin had like 0.6 more fantasy points per game. So I tend to think they were already converging before the season ended, which is why I'm more willing to say that like they're kind of neck and neck as it is. I know other people seem to think McLaurin's still firmly ahead. That a seasonal ADP certainly believes that. He goes like 2.5 rounds ahead of Dotson. I tend to see them more similarly, where I would take McLaurin like slightly ahead, but not significantly. And so with this injury, you get more early season production from Dotson, maybe solidifies his role a little bit more. I definitely see these guys as like ships passing in the night, where McLaurin is 27, 28 coming off this injury. Dotson is a young player who's ascending. I just think right now I know right now they're valued similarly in Dynasty, but I think by like week 4, Dotson could really put some distance between the two of them. And that makes me interested in buying him.
Yeah, I agree. Dotson's definitely the younger asset. And if they produce, let's say they have the exact same season, like exact same stat line, Dotson is going to be more valuable than Terry McLaurin next year.
Obviously. Yeah, absolutely. And I really just think in like the median outcome, we should expect similar seasons. Like even if McLaurin's a little bit ahead of him, I definitely think that they're going to be on similar levels. And I think there's some hype for Howell too. Not necessarily the point here, but there's some hype for Howell. He definitely conducted himself well in that second preseason game. He's been named the starter. He's got some good weapons to work with. I'm interested in this offense just in general. Like there's a lot of pieces here that are affordable, one way or another have paths to panning out, but Howell especially is exciting as a guy that could see a pretty big value boost if he just comes out here and is competent.
Yeah, pre-draft Sam Howell was actually the number 1 QB in my rookie model. I really like him. I like what he did as a college player, and I think that he has a good shot to succeed this year, and I think that his dynasty value could go up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we probably should have been trading our Trey Lance shares for Sam Howell a couple months ago. Wish I was doing that, but maybe a guy you can still get in on, relatively cheap, and might be worth it. He has some serious rushing upside. Like I said, I was on the Zoltan podcast and doing a preview, and he pointed out a really cool stat, which is that if you take away yards lost due to sacks, because college football counts sack yards as rushing yards, and so you lose yards. It's a really dumb system. But if you take out the sacks, he actually had like 1,100 rushing yards in his last season, which is insane. It was like almost 100 rushing yards per game. And his 40 time on Player Profiler is a lie. It's his 5-second 40 time is from high school. Yep. So I just think like the rushing upside is a little underhyped. Like I think this guy could be a full on Daniel Jones 700 rushing yards type of guy, and that's really exciting at his price. The question is just whether he gets benched or not. But I mean, that's a bet worth making.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Howell's completely underrated in terms of rushing ability. He had more rush yards per game in college than Desmond Ridder, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance,
and Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I mean, he is a rusher. And if you watch the preseason game, there were multiple times where the pocket was breaking down and he either got out, extended the play, and made a throw, or he just ran 14 yards for a first down. Like he does offer that, not true Konami upside, but Konami light upside, like you said, Daniel Jones, where he could run for 600 yards in a season pretty easily.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I'm I'm really going to look into getting some more shares of him, I think. Also, Brian Robinson, 4 targets. Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting for him. Definitely didn't see that coming, but it is preseason. We'll see how it goes when the real games start. Let's talk about some other running backs, though. Starting with some backups, we got Jaylen Warren making a fantastic 62-yard rushing touchdown play in their preseason game this week. He's getting a lot of hype. He's been getting some hype, but a lot of people were, I think, not aware of it. He's seeing his underdog ADP spike now. People are realizing that he's going to have a legitimate role in this offense, and that last year wasn't just some weird fluke. And in hindsight, he's really been a fantastic value all offseason. He's been going in the 15th round of startups as like the RB 50. So, what do you think about Jaylen Warren as a dynasty asset? And do you have any Warren? Are you trying to get some?
Yeah, I really like him. He's been a guy that, during last season, I was trying to just have like throw in trades. I'd throw in Jaylen Warren and I'll agree to the deal. And I got him a lot that way.
Nice.
I think that a really good comparison here is like the Tony Pollard Zeke situation, where we kind of have an inefficient plotter that gets a lot of volume, and then we have a talented backup that makes a lot of explosive plays. Mm-hmm. And if we look at how, Zeke and Pollard are looking these days in the dynasty market, we could only hope that Jaylen Warren can follow that path. I just think he could show this year he's going to get a lot. I think he will get a lot more work. We saw Najee Harris with like 80% opportunity shares lately when he was healthy. And towards the end of last season, we saw that drop to more of like a 65-35 split.
Yep.
So that continues to drop and become more Warren heavy. He'll have a great opportunity to show his explosiveness, and that he might even deserve to get more touches than Najee Harris does.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's better than Najee Harris, and all the Najee stands can come at me in the comments. I really don't care. I definitely think he's a better running back than Najee Harris, and there's only all the evidence to support that. But yeah, I love the Pollard comparison. I actually saw Jacob Sanderson had a tweet with Jaylen Warren, and he was like, "Gonna tell my kids this was Tony Pollard." And my cat is now in the video. I guess he got locked in here with me. I need to keep I just need to stay on track here. I love the Jaylen Warren, Tony Pollard comparison. I think it's important not to get carried away with those things, just because like most running backs aren't going to be Tony Pollard, even if they are really good. It's just hard for these guys to actually get that kind of opportunity. But that being said, a great guy to get if you can still get him. What I wouldn't do is get carried away and go start trading like second round picks for him, not to chase him. Like the key is to get these guys before they ascend into that kind of a role where they're a high end handcuff or they have some standalone value. We're not trying to chase them up the draft board. Go find the next guy. If you miss the boat on Warren, that's okay. There are more running backs. Go get the next guy. Just let this be like an incentive to prioritize the running back position just a little bit more on your benches in Dynasty.
Yeah, if you miss the boat on Jaylen Warren, go get like Jerome Ford. He's just a cheaper version. He's behind Chubb, and he looks like he's going to be the direct backup this year, and he's talented as well. So it's like it's a never-ending cycle. These guys get moved up, you go find the next one.
Yeah, I love Ford too, and he's discounted as well due to an injury, but he seems really locked into that RB2 spot. He had an interesting prospect profile at least, and the team seems to like him a lot. So I'm very interested in Ford. I have a lot of him, actually. He's one of my most rostered running backs. I only have a couple Warren shares, unfortunately. I actually just saw in one of my leagues that he got picked up on waivers, and I'm kicking myself because I didn't realize he was on waivers. It makes me so upset. It probably ruined my whole season, but got to be vigilant. You got to go on your sleeper app and you got to click availability in other leagues, and then you got to scroll all the way down and make sure he's not a free agent. They made it so easy, and I still didn't do it.
Yeah, try to just go sweep the waivers once a week or during the offseason. You just got to check.
I wish I wasn't so lazy. Another guy who was probably on waivers, recently, isn't anymore, is Keontae Ingram, who is really solidifying his role as the backup running back in Arizona. Solidifying might be the wrong word. Like, I don't know how solid it actually is, but at least in terms of what's shaping up for week 1, he does seem to clearly be the backup. Corey Clement is like a distant third. There's some UDFAs they have that are mixing in, but he is solidly the RB2. They brought in Marlon Mack, and he immediately got injured. That poor guy's career is probably over at this point. Yep. And so he's backing up James Conner, who is like definitely not the picture of durability. And that's very interesting. This is exactly the kind of running back you want to stash on your bench in Dynasty. The talent is sort of secondary here. It's all about the opportunity for touches. And if Connor were to miss time, I mean, there's tons of opportunity for touches here.
Yeah, I have some Keontae Ingram. I'm overweight on him according to market. And I think that, it's just a guy that has become a direct backup, and I want to own all those players in Dynasty. My benches are, pretty much like a couple quarterbacks, a couple tight ends, a couple wide receivers, and then like 10 running backs. So I have all these guys stashed, and I think that, basically if they're breathing and on a roster, I want them on my team.
Yeah.
And Keontae Ingram checks both those boxes, so he's on my team.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we chase these running backs in rounds 3 and 4 of rookie drafts. I mean, if you drafted Keontae Ingram in your rookie draft, it did not pay off right away. Maybe you dropped him. And if you did, that's okay. Hopefully you were picking up another running back that maybe paid off. Maybe you were picking up Jaylen Warren. But the reason we chase these guys, the reason we draft Zach Evans and Sean Tucker and Evan Hull and Izzy Abanikanda is like we're looking for these guys that are going to be direct backups that can fall into touches. Because what it happens, like here's what's going to happen. If James Conner misses a game, Keontae Ingram's going to be the most played player in DFS at minimum salary. And he's going to be projected for like 14 points. And you know who else is projected for 14 points? All of the overvalued running backs that you draft in that dead zone, like Alexander Madison, Isaiah Pacheco, AJ Dillon would be lucky to be projected for 14 points in a week. He's kind of the same sort of like upside bet, just a lot more expensive. But these fragile starters or these like non-explosive starters, these guys are overpriced because if you piece together like all these running back weeks, it's scary and it doesn't always work out, but you can often just stream running backs that give you those types of points. And so we want guys like Ingram, we want Warrens, and we want Tyjae Spears too, who's the next guy I want to talk about. Apparently he does not need ACLs in his knees. Maybe all running backs should just have them removed because this guy looks great on the field. Made some big plays in preseason week 2. Another guy who has clearly established himself as the backup to another, older running back in Derrick Henry. And this is a guy that was available in the 3rd round of rookie drafts. I mean, this is what we're looking for. Somebody like Tyjae Spears, who's not going to have much of a standalone role. But again, anytime Derrick Henry misses a game, if he misses a game, you can play Spears in your RB2 spot with confidence. Did you get any Spears in your rookie drafts?
I actually only got one. I was too busy drafting other rookie running backs ahead of him. But I think that at this point, with these running backs, we aren't expecting a long shelf life anyway. Tyjae Spears' main medical concern was that he wouldn't have a long shelf life, but he should be healthy for a short amount of time. And that's what we really need out of these guys. So I think he's a perfect guy that we want to own as a backup that we can have for 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And if his career ends after that, but you got multiple starting weeks out of him, then you got more than what you paid for.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. With these 3rd round rookie picks, if you get like 3 games that they actually get in your lineup and provide RB2 production, that's really all you need. Hopefully that helps you along your journey. Chris, this is a safe space, and I need you to confess, were you drafting Chase Brown and Zach Evans ahead of Tyjae Spears?
Not a chance.
No? Okay, good. You were following the draft capital.
Yes.
I may have taken a Chase Brown ahead of a Tyjae Spears. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't have a lot of Spears. I think that he was definitely a blind spot for me, and I didn't like the profile, and I didn't like the landing spot, which in hindsight was stupid because none of the backups to Henry were established either. But yeah, I don't have a ton, and I wish I had more. I've been drafting him a lot in best ball, but yeah, this is a guy you want to get, and you can probably still get him thrown into trades at this point. So I would continue looking for opportunities to get him. It's funny you mentioned Dameon Pierce just a little while ago because we are going to talk about him now. I totally get the line of thinking with him as a kind of standard dead zone type running back. He's on a bad offense. He does not profile as a high-end pass catcher. However, I do have one eyebrow raised at the moment. We look at the Texans and how they've handled this running back room. They had really every opportunity to add someone significant to the backfield. They had extra draft picks. They had tons of money. They haven't been linked to Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Ezekiel Elliott. They haven't been linked to trade for any of these running backs that wanted out. All they did was bring in Devin Singletary, who is like very mediocre in all facets. And the thought was, okay, Singletary is going to be the third down back. Pierce is going to be the grinder. This makes sense. Good way to put a backfield together on the cheap. But then we have the preseason, and Singletary's not playing third downs. They're subbing him off for Dare Ogunbowale on third downs, which then begs the question, okay, is Singletary just a first and second down backup to Dameon Pierce? I don't know. I mean, Singletary has never actually proven to be a good pass catcher. He's always been like pretty bad at it, but the Bills kept using him in that way. So we just sort of assumed that that was like what he does. But I mean, maybe we should be open to the possibility that they really do want to use Pierce on like an every down role and then just use Singletary as to like take drives every now and then. Do you think that that's possible?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I'd say that it's probably more likely at this point than him like ceding all the third down work to a guy like Devin Singletary. And he's definitely not going to be ceding third down work to Dario Ogunbowale, that's for sure. So
I would never say never. He ceded third down work to Rex Burkhead last year, so we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I have had a long and complicated relationship with Dameon Pierce. I had kind of a viral tweet last year, viral from by my standards. You probably didn't see it. You probably did, Chris, because you follow me. But you listening, there's a good chance you didn't see it. But it was just about why you should sell Dameon Pierce for a 2023 first round pick. It had become like a very popular sort of question or idea because there was a trade that blew up about somebody saying they traded a first for Dameon Pierce. And then in the end, I like made this argument and I really believed the argument, but I really ended up being wrong. But like, I don't think my process was wrong. Anyway, the back end of 2023 first round ended up being like really bad, and Dameon Pierce ended up playing really well. And now it looks like he might be a full-blown bell cow. I just think this is an example of like why it's important to be humble in your process. And I'm saying this before the season even starts, so maybe I can walk back this admit of defeat later. But I do put a lot of weight on analytics, and I put a lot of weight on things like draft capital and what's the historical precedent for players. And I'm not going to stop doing that, but it is important to be humble and realize that the most likely outcome is not the guaranteed outcome. And I'm always going to operate, based on what's the most likely outcome. That's how I want to make deals. But it is important to realize that other things can happen that aren't the most likely outcome, and you need to be willing to adjust your priors. And so with Pierce, I'm rising on Pierce because it's more and more likely that he's going to play on passing downs. If he plays on passing downs, he can be incredibly relevant because he is a good rusher, and he's going to get a ton of carries. And so at that point, you're pushing him up into company with somebody like a Josh Jacobs, right? He can be a heavy utilization on the ground, get 40 receptions on a mediocre offense. And that's really all you need to be an RB1.
Yeah, I'm right with you there where I wish I probably would have taken one or two Dameon Pierce. I've leaned into diversification a lot more this year, diversification at cost. We're not reaching for these players to get assets, but, if in a couple leagues, Dameon Pierce falls a couple spots, I probably should have taken him instead of, taking somebody else that I already have multiple shares of. And I did that this year more with like guys like Kendre Miller. I wasn't a big fan of him, but I took shares because other people also didn't like him. He fell and I grabbed him. We need to be more open to stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, like you're saying, if Dameon Pierce has a 3-down role, it will be simple for him to be an RB1. We saw Najee, his rookie year. He was not good. He was not efficient, but he got all of the volume, and he was, I think, RB3 overall for the season. So, I mean, yeah, the sky is actually the limit if Dameon Pierce is a 3-down back, even on a bad Texans offense.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs was also the RB3 or RB2 last year as well. So it's absolutely possible with this profile. You don't have to catch 80 passes to be a top 5 running back. If you get a ton of carries and you can find the end zone a few times, get 40 receptions, like the math adds up. It's very possible. So, changing my tune a little bit on Pierce, been trying to mix him into the best ball portfolio. I'm not necessarily aggressively chasing him in Dynasty because I'm just not sure, like, the ceiling is there, but I'm still not sure how super likely the ceiling is, given that the Houston Texans offense could still be terrible. And like, he's still a day 3 running back, and he could get run into the ground this season and have a great year, and he could still get replaced or placed in a committee the following year. So like, I don't know, the payoff in Dynasty, I'm still not sure the juice is worth the squeeze. But I'm open to it. And I'm trying to be okay with it. But a guy I'm not buying, a guy I'm stubbornly still out on, is James Cook, who is also getting all the positive preseason signals. So maybe I'll end up, looking like a fool again. But I just cannot. I just cannot buy into this idea that James Cook is going to be a workhorse running back for the Bills. I know he's getting all the snaps with the starters, but this is a guy who all through college, in his first year in the NFL, like not only wasn't a workhorse, but like wasn't anywhere close to dominating a backfield. He is undersized. He's not even a dominant receiving threat in terms of market share. I don't know. What do you make of James Cook?
So I still think James Cook isn't good, but it doesn't matter if I think he's good or not. If he is going to be a workhorse for the Bills, I mean, obviously that'd be a better Dameon Pierce basically. But I do think the preseason usage is a little misleading. I think Damien Harris is injured or didn't play in the most recent game.
That's true.
I think James Cook had like a 98% snap share or something like that of the starters reps, like 12 out of 13 reps or something like that.
Right.
And he had about 3 opportunities. So while he is on the field, they're still not even getting the ball to him. I would definitely not be buying him off of these snap counts. I'd be more patient and seeing what happens once we get to the NFL season, or at least if we can get some information with Damien Harris healthy. But either way, I'm not excited for James Cook. I'm not buying him, but I'm also not selling him. If I have James Cook, I'm going to hold him because I'm going to see what his week 1 NFL usage is. And if he comes out week 1 and he's in third down packages, he's in goal line, he's in short yardage, he's first and second down, then I know I have an asset that can score me some points this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do want to circle back to James Cook, but real quick, I just a comment on that trade strategy. And this is something we all do. You say he's a hold, but not a buy, and you want to hold him to find out what he is. So does that imply that if you could buy him in other leagues at a palatable price, you would also do that to find out what he is?
I think it was Zoltan talking about this, and it made so much sense when he said it. But like, I still wouldn't buy. Like, I would not pay what James Cook costs. And
then shouldn't you sell him for what James Cook costs?
Then I should sell him for what James Cook costs. But I just hate selling my players. It's that you've talked about it before, the psychological thing. Yeah, the people you own are more valuable when you own them than when someone else owns them.
Yeah. Well, let's be careful. We don't own any people. We just own digital versions of them.
Yes.
But yeah, it is the endowment effect, and I also try to fight against it. But if you have a firm stance that you won't buy a player, then you probably should be selling that player, right? Like you can be neutral to a player and say like his cost is fine, so I don't feel the need to do anything. But that means you should be open to getting offers. You should be open to accepting offers if they are a good price. Just a little I'm trying to get out of the mindset of like hold this player. So I just thought it was a good time to bring that up. You should be willing to have a price for a player and just buy him or sell him based on that. And right now the price is going up. And so if you're not really into that, like this price going up, you should probably be exploring ways to pivot, other players that you believe in more. But we could be wrong. I mean, he could absolutely be a featured player for the Bills. They spent a second round pick on him. Most running backs that go in the second round tend to get some volume at some point. I'm just worried that the Bills' idea of utilizing him is not going to be as exciting as we want it to be. And in the sense that like he probably won't get a lot of goal line looks. And even if he does play the passing downs or run all the routes or whatever, that Josh Allen's still not going to check down that much. And he might just be like a slightly better version of Devin Singletary.
Yeah, I think that Damien Harris is going to score a lot of touchdowns. And I think he's going to be a lot of short yardage. And just like you said, Josh Allen loves to run the ball. So, yeah, there's a lot of limited of the, high value touches on that offense.
Man, I hope Damien Harris scores touchdowns. I have so much of him in best ball. And lately it's been like, oh, Latavius Murray might actually be the backup. And oh my gosh, would that be so bad?
No, it'll be Damien Harris. And I've been drafting him as well. I think he's a very good asset to have.
Okay. Well, I'm happy about your confidence in that. Hopefully he can get healthy sooner than later. Let's move on to another negative little note here. Kyle Pitts, my tight end 1, your tight end 2 in Dynasty, unless I convinced you to move him up to tight end 1. He is still not being used properly by his coaches, and it is driving me up the wall. The Falcons, or specifically Arthur Smith, just seem absolutely hell-bent on shooting themselves in the foot. They just will not make this man an every down player. I don't know what he has to do on the field. I guess it's block. I don't know. Maybe he's bad at blocking. That seems like an Arthur Smith thing to do. But let me just pull up his usage here.
Yeah, I mean, you have written on the show sheet, is Arthur Smith going to ruin Kyle Pitts? And I unfortunately think the answer is going to be yes, because we've already seen it. And I don't know why he wouldn't continue to do what he has been doing, because I think he's been happy with how his team performs.
Okay, hold the line. We're holding the line. I say no. That was a provocative question with a vanilla answer, and the vanilla answer is to just keep buying Kyle Pitts. I refuse to accept that Kyle Pitts will be ruined. I think even if he does get subbed off on some certain downs and certain personnel packages, that he is still going to earn enough volume on the routes that he does run to be an incredibly useful fantasy tight end. And I do think that eventually, like, talent wins out. He's still a young player. He's missed time in his second season. He's still working his way back from an injury. I tend to think that, by midseason, this could look a lot different. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going down swinging with Kyle Pitts.
No, yeah, I definitely am too. I'm buying all the Kyle Pitts. I'm drafting all the Kyle Pitts. I'm acquiring all of the Kyle Pitts. Arthur Smith is just a terrible, terrible person.
I'm just willing. I'm willing to, like, if that's the way that I lose, fine, so be it.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm supposed to become homeless because I joined too many dynasty leagues and drafted Kyle Pitts in all of them because Arthur Smith wants to play Michael Pruitt for 50% of the snaps, then, like, fine, that's my lot in life and I accept it. But I'm not going to sell this guy based on fear about coaches being stupid. Like,
yeah, this is all talent over situation. It's just another case of that.
Yeah.
Arthur Smith is not, there's no way he's dumb enough to just not play his best players. And his best player might be Bijan, but his second best player is probably Kyle Pitts.
And the key is, okay, Kyle Pitts is 21 years old, maybe 22. I don't know. 22. I think he's 22. If Arthur Smith is that stupid, sooner or later he will get fired. Like, you cannot be that stupid to spend the 4th overall pick on a tight end and then, like, not let him play. And if you're the kind of coach that does that, you're probably the kind of coach that does other things that get you fired. So eventually we will see Kyle Pitts in an offense that is either not run by Arthur Smith or is properly run by Arthur Smith. And I still say he's going to break fantasy. So just hold the line, keep buying Kyle Pitts. If anybody's worried about this, go buy him. If he has a bad week 1, you can buy him. If he has a bad week 2, you can buy him. If he has a bad week 6, you can buy him. I don't care. Just get him on your team. Eventually he's going to do things. I refuse to relent. All right. So we made it through most of the news, all the stuff that I had written down. Are there any other observations from preseason week 2 that you'd like to touch on here?
Not really. I just have one. I only watched the Ravens game because, I'm a Ravens fan. And, Sam Howell did look very good in the game, but this happens with a lot of the preseason games. Sam Howell in the second quarter is out there playing against the Ravens' third stringers, so he did dominate them, but he should be. This is what should be expected out of our assets. We shouldn't move anybody up because they did what we expect them to do. Now I love Sam Howell and, it confirms my priors. So I'm very happy about that, but we need to take that and all these other preseason performances. We need to find the context, and the context be really hard to find, which is why in general, I just avoid pretty much all of it. The things that matter are the things that we've talked about, like the negative news, the snap counts, the usage, like the actual actions, not just, the narratives and the highlights.
Absolutely. Good point. We don't want to double count. That's key. We don't want to double count. And I think that would be an example of double counting where he's already the starter. As a starter, you should be expected to perform against backups. And when you perform against backups, you should not be doubly rewarded for doing so. And that's a good point. If you don't watch the games, which I have watched very little actual preseason football. I have been breaking down looking at these articles, listening to other people, looking at the snap counts. There's a lot of great stuff from PFF where you get to see, how many snaps they played with the starters and the routes run and all that. But I haven't watched a lot, and it is important to put that context into action there. So that is a good final note to wrap things up today. A little bit of a shorter episode, but I think we covered a lot, and I'm excited to see what craziness happens in preseason week 3. I'll be back next week with Billy. It is episode 21, and he does apparently come on every 7 episodes now. So I'll be bringing him back next week. We'll hopefully make some predictions for the season. I'll try to work some hot takes out of him. I'll bring some of my own. It'll be a good time. So come back for that. Big shout out to Chris, of course, for filling in. He is always there to answer the call. At Chris Miles 1017 on Twitter. Go ahead and follow him. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_DFF. This has been the Factory Tour, and I will see you all next week.